Coming up, writer and producer Mitch Glazer joins Illeana here in studio for I Blame Dennis Hopper, so stay tuned.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies.
And now, it's the I Blame Dennis Hopper podcast, starring Illeana Douglas. Eavesdrop with Illeana as she interviews Hollywood's most prominent players about filmmaking, acting, and what really happens on the set of your favorite flicks and TV shows.
Well, hello, everyone. It's Illeana Douglas. Welcome to our Christmas edition here of I Blame Dennis Hopper podcast. Wait a minute. You are not Tamara Burr.
I'm not Tamara. The audio listeners are like, did Tamara get a cold? I'm actually very honored and flattered to be here, Illeana. Thank you so much. You know, I'm already a huge fan of the show. I'm producing in the booth usually.
That's right.
But...
This is Jeff Graham,
yes.
who is on it whenever we need our clips and trailers and sound bites.
And luckily, I'm a huge film nerd and a huge Illeana fan and a huge Mitch Glazer fan. So you guys chose a very great show for me to hop in and ruin the show.
And you helped out and brought snacks.
I did. I brought a loaf of bread. So
which I love. We're the snack podcast. Okay, we got to do this quickly because we have such a big show. Many things to talk over this week, as we usually do. Just a sweet goodbye to director Penny Marshall, just an amazing icon and contributed so much, was the first female director to crack the $100 million ceiling and such great films like A League of Her Own, which, as I'm always saying, I'm not really sure why it's not in the AFI Top 100.
Love that movie. Yeah.
Yes, A League of Her Own, The Preacher's Wife, Big, which I think is another. But my personal favorite is Awakenings.
I've actually never seen Awakenings.
Oh,
I need to. I know.
Don't plan on going anywhere afterwards. It is a tearjerker. It's just an incredible movie, and her legacy in Hollywood. And it's so sad. These directors like Nora Ephron, who's gone, and Penny Marshall were there in the 90s, really demonstrating that women could handle all sorts of genres, and she will certainly be missed. Part of the
I think
Fisher
like
circle.
Nora, Penny Marshall really had a distinctive voice in her movies, and I miss that time when you did have like the $30 million original movie that was a story that starts and ends when you leave. It's not a franchise.
Yes,
and that will be so missed because we have these amazing female directors now, like Tamara Jenkins, but even those movies, if she's on a big franchise movie, you don't always get the chance to really put your directorial voice in there.
Yes, her relationship with Tom Hanks. What's interesting about, she did Big, and then he did a couple movies that didn't do so well, and so when she was going to do A League of Her Own, he hopped on board that train.
Wow.
And got his career back on track.
Such a good movie.
So that was a good thing. Okay, in other news, thank you. We're going to make some changes coming up I love change.
Yes.
No, I don't. I hate change. I love change for the new year with the show, and so look forward to that. And I spent time reading the reviews, which are like 98% positive, but I like to concentrate on the negative reviews. So just a heads up to the fellow who wrote that I interrupt my guests. I'm Italian, so like I know you think I'm interrupting, but that's talking in Italian.
It's perfect. It's the conversational. If you want a less conversational, you can always go to NPR. But this is a conversation where we're eavesdropping.
Yes, I wish Terry Gross would have interrupted me when we wouldn't have these deadly kind of pauses. But I get so excited. Interviewing the people, and sometimes I actually know the person. So, but I'll sort of try to be aware of that. Not really.
Not too much. I was going to say, I don't want to lose the magic we already have. So.
No, I know. I like to read criticism and then just deny it exists.
Perfect.
And then in other news, talking about what we're doing for the holiday season in terms of watching movies. First of all, my Marathon Academy viewing. I do try to see a lot of the movies outside, but then a lot of the movies go first. This is my system. They first go to my 85-year-old mom, who is a great movie critic. So she watches everything first. So she watched Roma, and then she gives me her review on it, and then I watch it. So and then we talk about it.
Would you guys ever record a podcast of you two reviewing a movie? Because
God, I would love it.
I would love it too. And honestly, all you got to do is just take out your phone and record it. But we'll put that in the podcast stream.
The best ever was I remember there was a movie a couple of years ago. The German actor, and he played a sex addict. Can't even think of the movie.
Not Michael Fassbender.
It
Shame?
is Shame.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. Thank you, Jeff Graham. And so I'd seen the movie, and I wanted to say to my mom, like, oh, by the way, Mom, don't watch Shame, 'cause it's going to be really. She goes, oh, I saw it. Been there, done that. You know, I forget, like my mother. They were hippies in the 60s, so nothing is going to shock them. But so we disagreed on the Paul Schrader movie.
I haven't seen it yet. First Reformed?
Yes.
I've heard it's wonderful, but I haven't
loved
seen
it.
Yeah.
My mother did not like it.
Okay, I need to see it.
We agreed on Roma. We were both a little, without the grand visual effects. I don't know if I don't know. I just was not,
I was talking with someone about Roma, and you're a writer, Illeana, and
yes.
I don't think Roma is really a writer's movie. And, it's like a very filmic kind of cinematography.
It's a memory piece.
But I think I'm also a writer, so I like watching movies with great dialogue and, a really strong narrative thrust. And I think Roma tells its story in the pictures, which that's not always to my taste as a moviegoer. There's not much dialogue in that movie. It's really about what you see, and I like what I hear a lot of times in a movie as well. So
I just often wonder, it reminded me of Ingmar Bergman doing movies about his childhood, which I really enjoyed. But you wonder, is there a statement within it? And for some reason, I personally got bogged down by the idea of this family and the disparity in the incomes. And I don't know, maybe that's me. I should be looking at the movie, but at times it really troubled me, and I was getting very sad for the woman as opposed to, I was like, okay, I know she's the lifeblood of the family and you're elevating her, but on the other hand, it's like she's your domestic servant.
Well, and I felt the same way too.
I was troubled by that.
Yeah, I was troubled by it too, and it's kind of like, it's not the story we want to see right now. At this very moment, it's not necessarily the version of womanhood that I want to be seeing on screen. It might be part of it too.
Maybe, that's a very good point.
It's like I don't know if you're watching The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel on Amazon.
Yes, wonderful show.
Yeah, that's an example of the female story I really want to see because it's pushing back against. It's just such a beautiful tribute to. I don't know. I think that might just be a personal taste of mine, but
yes,
I get why people are loving Roma. It just might have not really been for me.
Yes, and then finally, Christmas movies. And what are some of your favorite?
Yes. It's interesting because when I think of the holiday movies, I think of movies that are holiday movies that I love and movies that my family always watches during the holidays. So I love Elf. I don't know if you've seen that with Will Ferrell.
Wonderful. Love
that movie. I also, of course, love Home Alone, which I know you're
Home
a fan
Alone.
of too.
I love Home Alone. I have to watch Home Alone every year.
Yes.
That's one of my favorites.
But in terms of movies that my family always watches at the holidays, we love the Steve Martin Father of the Bride, the 1991.
Okay, that's funny because I'm Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Oh, nice.
It's not Christmas unless I'm watching.
I love it. You need those comfort food comedies, and the ones that our guest Mitch Glazer makes.
Oh my God!
I was saying that the PG-13 comedy isn't really a thing anymore. There are still good studio comedies, but they're such hard R's, and I miss sort of the Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and the Scrooged and the movie that you
Meatballs.
Yes,
and I wasn't part of that, but yes, the movies that we would see as teenagers.
Right. I don't know what comedies that teenagers are seeing anymore because they're all R.
Either.
They're all R-rated, so. I
actually went to see comedies with my parents, Mel Brooks movies and Young Frankenstein and, films like that. Well, we're going to get to that, but the producers, you know that Mitch Glazer's uncle was a producer on The Producers. Wow. So that's another great story. Well, we should bring Mitch in to talk about favorite holiday movies, which I guess this is the perfect time. Let's play a clip from Scrooged, which I'm going to be seeing tonight at the New Beverly Theater. So if you're in Los Angeles, Mitch will be there, and come see it. let's take a look at this trailer.
7 o'clock, Psycho sees Santa's workshop, and only Lee Majors can
See this,
stop
Mitch?
them.
We're showing the
That's
trailer.
reindeer die.
As it plays, I'm going to say that Mitch is a writer, producer, and a director, and of course some of his best-known works are Lost in Translation, Great Expectations, Rock the Casbah, and of course the classic Christmas film Scrooged, which is celebrating its 30th year this year, and will be playing tonight at the New Beverly. Oh my God, now...
There he is. It's just, I was a producer on Lost in Translation. I don't want it to be, I mean, I want it to seem as if I wrote.
Oh wait, you have to speak into the mic, not the... You can go ahead and speak. I'm they're watching the... It's such a great trailer.
Yeah. I forgot Miles Davis is in it. Sure.
No, it's not.
Right there. That is completely counterintuitive. So you want me to have these on?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sorry. Is it going to ruin your hair?
Yeah, completely. But by the way, it's been ruined before. Good.
I miss when trailers were long like this.
Well, back then it was basically show the entire movie.
A ghost? John Forsythe. Bobcat Goldthwait. Hey! You glad to see me, or is this a shotgun in your pocket? You know this one?
This was all Billy, that stuff.
Does everybody know this one? Carol Kane. Robert Mitchum.
Literally thought she hit him.
Oh, really?
I was on set, almost died.
This holiday season, see Bill Murray get screwed.
Yay!
Back off, big man. That may work with the chicks, but not with me.
Well, here we are. Ladies and gentlemen, Mitch Glazer, thank you so much for being here.
A treat.
I've been
Finally.
Finally!
Right.
I've been begging and sending treats and money and...
It all worked.
And is it, I mean, before I get to my favorite, you know, I always ask people what the first movie they saw is. Now that's do you remember the first movie that you saw before we get to talking about your films?
It might have been in the same era as, but Ben-Hur. I remember seeing Ben-Hur in a drive-in in Miami. And the mother and sister being in the caves with leprosy.
Yes.
Kept me up till about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I mean, it completely blew my mind. And yeah, so I remember Ben-Hur. I don't remember much else about the movie except weird hands coming out of a cave, and you know.
You know what's interesting about that scene, because it scared me too, and then you watch it as an adult. It just shows if somebody has one line, it's the centurion who comes out and he goes, "Lepers," and he sells it.
Well, as a kid, the things I was afraid of, I mean, there were things I should have been afraid of, like hurricanes in Miami or whatever, but it was leprosy, quicksand,
quicksand,
and volcanoes. Those three things, none of which existed.
Yes,
you know, in the peninsula.
I was afraid of leeches from The African Queen.
Exactly.
Every time I would swim, I'm gonna get leeches. My mother was like, "You're not. We're in a pool. Stop it."
Yeah, but the leprosy, the Ben-Hur, but there was, you know. First of all, drive-ins were, you know, magic and
the best,
you know, with your family and all that stuff. But yeah, those movies. That movie, I remember, I loved Elvis Presley movies as a kid. I don't remember how early it was, but you know, Girl Happy it was shot in Fort Lauderdale apparently, and that was life-changing. Shelley Fabares and Elvis.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
Now your parents were teachers.
My mom was a teacher. My dad was an electrical engineer, and interesting, I mean, to me anyhow, he designed all the lighting for those big hotels. So the Fontainebleau, the Eden Rock, all the classic 50s mid-century hotels, he did the lighting for it. And I grew up on his shoulder, walking the property of the Fontainebleau Hotel, like in '56 or whatever, whenever it was coming around, and my mom, meanwhile, ended up being an English teacher at Beach High, my high school, and her claim to fame, or I mean that's a nice way of putting it, but she was Mickey Rourke's English teacher, and she did an impression almost to the day she died of Mickey in class, which is this. So she has a huge memory of the top of his head from but he did credit her often and always for showing Place in the Sun and changing his life, showing that movie in 10th grade, as he says, first real movie I ever saw.
Yeah.
And he saw Montgomery Clift, and it was like, I want to be that guy.
That's amazing. And we're going to get to that because then years later you end up working with him.
Yeah.
That must have been strange. Now, the other part of your showbiz family, as I mentioned in the introduction, is that your uncle was a producer.
Yes.
On The Producers.
He was the producer of The Producers. Wow. And it was the first movie set I was ever on. I went to the shooting. I was there for a week in '65. Wow. The shooting of the play within a movie.
Yes.
The Springtime for Hitler.
Right. So,
and we met Mel, Uncle Mel, met Mel at the time, and the cast with Dick Shawn and Zero and all those guys. But the thing that I remember were the showgirls, because I don't know if you remember they're all linking arms and doing all the Busby Berkeley kind of stuff.
Yes.
And they were like literally they were all over 6'2", and I was in 6th grade, so I was like 3'2", and they were wearing like stuck on pretzels and beer mugs and right, and to see women like that just kind of walking around in high heels, defining.
You said show business.
I love this town.
I'm in it.
I'm in it.
Did you have any interaction with either Gene Wilder or Zero Mostel?
Less with Zero, but we did meet him through Sydney, and Sydney had known him for going back to the Blacklist days. I mean, I'd known him when he was doing stand-up in Miami Beach, and my Uncle Sidney was a remarkable guy, and producing was the last of a million careers. I mean, it was just something he ended up falling into, but and Mel talks about him beautifully, but Gene I got to know well at the time, Gene Wilder. So I met Gene Wilder in whatever that was, 65, and then weirdly, randomly, became friends with Gilda through the SNL guys and close with Gilda. So when Gene came back into that world, it was funny. I hadn't seen him in decades, and
wow,
yeah, and but I knew him as a young actor, and just my uncle also produced a movie called Quaxter Fortune Has a Cousin, in the Bronx.
I do not know that one.
No, but you'll look it up.
I will.
It was Margot Kidder's first movie.
Oh.
Ever. And she was dazzling, and I met Margot then as well, and she ended up we ended up being good friends all the way through, her life off and on. But I do remember meeting Gene and Margot and all those people in elementary school or junior high school.
So did you have a sense when you were on the set that you were going to be a writer, or that you wanted to be in show business? Did you have any sense of direction in that?
Not as far as what my place would be.
Yeah.
Because I just thought the set was the most exciting place I'd ever seen in my life. I mean, if someone would have paid me, and I'm still trying to get that gig, to just like hang around, and I was amazingly good at it, and amusing, and out of the way. But no, just the circus of it and the size of it, and to be on the other side of the camera. It was never acting ever, but to be on the other side of the camera and in some capacity and see it get made or help get it made, hit me that summer, that week. I mean, I came back, but I could always write. I mean, it was just one of the things I could, that was the thing I could do. So high school newspaper kind of that guy, and I remember I was in 12th grade, the features editor of my high school newspaper, and I remember the treat was I got to review first run movies before they were released. So I saw Easy Rider. It was that year,
wow.
69, 70. I graduated in 70, and but yeah, so I could always write, but just being in the energy, it still gets me. I mean, it can be enervating, as you know. I mean, at a certain point, you just want to kill yourself and be carried off the set. but usually, it's still it is exciting.
Oh, I always get excited. Yeah. I love the whole dirty business. And then, so how did you went to NYU? Did you go as a writer, as a
English major?
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I mean, I had a girlfriend who was in the film program, and I remember she was fairly bored with the whole thing, or so I remember helping her with there's that first thing apparently where they give you a 60 millimeter camera, or maybe it's an 8 millimeter, but 60 millimeter, I believe.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to shoot in Washington Square Park your first movie, and she just came home sobbing, and I don't know what to do, and I please, and so we did a skateboard movie. This is 1973
Wow.
or 4,
Uh-huh.
and I had to be the skateboard guy. But yeah, so I mean, I it was around obviously, and also my uncle was still active. But
Did you ask him for advice, or?
I did. I mean, when I graduated college, I asked, because he was there, and he was doing work less than initially, and he sent me to meet people much too powerful to help me. Like
Right.
guys that were just ahead of
Yes.
William Morris in New York.
Right.
And
Wait, do we have the same childhood? Wait a minute, that's what my grandfather did too.
so useless.
Yes.
And they go, so what do you want to do? And I go,
Who did you meet? I met Howard Houseman.
I think that same guy, Howie Hausman, at William Morris, right?
Yes.
So like the top floor of that white building.
Yes. I was like a kid. I showed him clippings from like dinner theater. It's like, go home.
I showed him my Easy Rider review. He said, brilliant, get up.
It's your very first general meeting, and they don't get any more intentional even as you get older, right?
Right, and that was so general that it was sweet that they took him, as you know, they kind of had to. And
Oh,
but
gosh.
I met John Hammond Sr., the guy who signed Bruce Springsteen,
Yeah.
and he was a little bit more, practical, saying he said to me, you should be a publicist. He said, in the record business, then you work your way up to A&R, and but I didn't get hired, so I started writing rock
That's funny.
music.
Yeah. So we have to get to then you started working for a magazine. Which came first, Rolling Stone or Crawdaddy?
Crawdaddy, yeah. I mean, there was a minute where I was writing for Circus, and that era of and interviewing just the strangest groups of people. I mean, Pure Prairie League, not strange, but I mean, it was
Yeah.
a great Billy Preston, those kind of people, and at that point, and then Crawdaddy was a definite step up, because the quality of writers, was at another level, and yeah, and I was, it was one of those jobs where passion and a little bit of talent apparently got you everywhere, and so quickly, by the time I was like 22 years old, I was writing cover stories. And the irritating thing for me was I was the youngest person I'd ever seen do it, and Cameron was like 14, 12. There was one fucking guy who was like a baby. I was like, he was stealing my young thunder, but still. But
You have better hair.
yeah, hear that, Cameron? But yeah, so and it was a great time to be doing that. To be, first of all, reading Rolling Stone changed my life, and I wanted to get to that was the top of the pyramid for me, really, at the time.
Yeah.
I wanted to write for Rolling Stone, but at Crawdaddy we had an amazing group of really good writers, and I brought in Michael Hare, who wrote the beautiful book Dispatches, to write for us, and but you could basically, I mean, the music business was so huge, and there's so much money that they were, I mean, the way we ate literally was by going to concerts. Go to the bottom line, and they would give you,
Yeah.
food, and so it was a great time to be. It was like Almost Famous.
Well, that's what it sounds like. They had the money where they could say, "Oh, we want you to do." It's like in the movies. We want you to do a profile on this person and give you a ticket. And
I could come up. I mean, I interviewed, people that I dreamt of meeting my whole life. So they said, "Who do you want to?" This is a Crawdaddy. I said George Harrison, and so I came out here for a week. In fact, I flew out here to meet George, and I was like 23, I think. I mean, I'd seen the Beatles live on the Ed Sullivan Show in Miami Beach at the Deauville Hotel. My sister and I saw them, play on that show, right? So I was a complete freak for them. And then like 9 years later, I'm sitting there as peers or whatever, but as a professional. But I get off the plane from New York to LA, assuming a publicist or somebody from Warner Brothers is going to be there to meet me. I've been drinking heavily on the flight all over.
Of course.
And because I don't like flying. But anyhow, so we land, and there's this beautiful, like, vintage Mercedes, copper-colored, and George Harrison in the and I'm like wandering with my carry-on or whatever, and I go, oh, this is going to be a bad ride. I mean, and he was so lovely and forgiving, But yeah, he took me to the hotel. He just met me at the airport.
Now, at what point do you have pre-questions, or do you just try to play it cool and go, all right, all my questions are going out the window. I'm going to go on instinct.
Well, as you know, both happen. I mean, meaning I definitely prepared. I mean, especially for those kind of interviews. I mean, I knew his career, and I mean, this is just nerd stuff, but
safe place, man.
Thank you. But I remember
We're
actually
deep cuts.
I remember actually saying, "Is it deep cut?" I feel like a DJ. I actually said to him, "How could you write a song called While My Guitar Gently Weeps and have Eric Clapton play lead guitar on it? It's your guitar, you're weeping. Why is he, because stuff that I've been carrying around, my whole Beatle childhood. So I was prepared. But then, as you know, hopefully, it goes where it goes, and I loved it. I mean, I got to interview Peter Sellers, and where I met your grandfather on the set of being there in Asheville, which was insane.
Wasn't
set.
that was the first set I was on?
Wasn't that crazy?
Yes.
That fireplace?
Yes, that's why I was like, movies are magic.
It was.
I must be in the movie somehow. This must happen.
Yes, and then you never
Plus
get to
they
that house
feed you.
again. Yeah.
Plus they feed you all the time.
And well,
that's been one of my weird, funny things about movies. It's like, why do they think you're constantly hungry? Like, there's nowhere in life does someone every hour come around and ask you if you want coffee or.
it is sweet. But there is that feeling of it's like a food trough, like the craft service is just someone dumping M&Ms and it's like just.
And what were your impressions of Peter Sellers?
Loved him. I mean, I went to. That was the end of the interview. The interview started in Switzerland, in Gstaad. He had a beautiful chalet, with Ohm on top of it, and it was summertime, and it was again. I mean, I dreamt of meeting that guy, and he was so excited because he was going to be on the cover of Rolling Stone, and the tapes are amazing. I played it for my daughter now, who Strangelove is her favorite movie, and he did all the voices. Told me where he got all the voices. I mean, the tape is so spectacular because Peter Sellers on fire. I mean, he was really, and it was his last interview. He didn't live much longer than that piece.
Yeah, I always felt he wasn't as crazy as everybody says. I just thought he was more misunderstood in a way.
And he was much
He's
more
a performer,
complete, natural. One of those guys. I mean, like Bill. In a way, in similar ways, incredibly brightest guy in the room, well read, and should he see something funny or then no one can compete. It's just at another level of the way he sees the world. Sellers and Bill, but I loved it. I spent like 5 days with him, and it was a great interview. And he talked about a daughter he'd never met, and started to cry. It was like a Barbara Walters moment, which had never happened to me, by the way.
Yeah.
But he was so beautiful, and then he said, come to the set. And so I flew, not right away, but, like a couple weeks later when he was doing the movie, and got to see Shirley MacLaine and your grandfather. And I mean,
I thought they were pretty loose. I mean, again, I was a kid, but my grandfather loved it, and he was very good about improv. He always, his whole career, even though people in the 30s and 40s think it was all written by Billy Wilder, but they did a lot of improving then, and changes in the script, and the set felt very loose.
I thought so too. And Ashby, I mean, it doesn't get any better and looser.
Everyone on that. Jack Warden.
Incredible, right? No, it was, my sense of your grandfather, I mean, he was in our house anyhow, but was royalty. I mean, he was on the set, and just a different thing, and Sellers' performance was mind-boggling. If anyone hasn't seen the movie, he's just incredible in it.
Oh, I love that movie. Now, how did you get from then working at from Rolling Stone to your connection with Saturday Night Live? And I think we actually texted each other about it a little bit. It was the first year of the show, and in New York, it was Chevy Chase. Cover of New York Magazine. Yeah.
It was all Chevy, and he was really handsome and funny and deservedly. But I kept being drawn to the big guy. I mean, I'd watch the sketches and go, who's that? And so at the end of the first year, I said to my editor at Crawdaddy, I said, let's put him on the cover, and they agreed. He'd never been on the cover before, and so I met John fall of '76, and it changed my life. I mean, through John, I met Billy. He introduced me
Yeah.
to Murray and Michael O'Donoghue, and everything came from him, including, you know, a couple of years later, like 3 years later, sitting in his. Danny called it the Reich Palace, but it was like a kind of accurate. It was kind of a formal, you know, on Morton Street in New York, and for us it was plush. I mean, it was really something. And sitting in the living room of the Reich Palace, and John's on the phone with a guy named Sean Daniels, who's at Universal, and this is after Animal House, and John says, I know who can write Kingpin, Mitch. He's sitting right here. And apparently Sean said, great. And he puts his hand on the phone and said, do you want to write a script for me and Danny? I went, yeah, that sounds really good. And then, of course, it was like 7 years later before I got a movie made. But it got me in the Guild, and, you know, it was earn while you learn.
Yeah.
And John was, you know, the most generous. To this day, it's one of the sweetest things about my friendship with Bill is that there aren't that many people that we can share this stuff with, of memories of him.
Right.
And so, and not in any kind of, you know, but specific. And when there was one dinner recently where Bill and was talking about how powerful John and generous and aware he was in an improv situation on set, on stage, you know, Second City type thing. And you know, that whole thing is about, you know, you only succeed if the person, your partner, does. So it's not like a knife fight in acting. It's very supportive, and Bill was saying, you know, I could see his mind working and saving me, Billy, in a scene. You know, just to give it. It was funny, you know, around that time, or when I first met John, we were in Martha's Vineyard, and there was July 4th. You know, it was raining, and the Taylor family were there, James and his brothers, and we're all in this barn, and you can't shoot the fireworks off them. They're doing it inside, which is maniacal. But so John said, let's do a movie, and Jimmy had one of those old video cameras, like TV almost, like big. You know, this is 78 or whatever, and John starts doing this thing about the creature that attacked Martha's Vineyard, and he'd introduced Danny Aykroyd or James or whatever, and I wish I had that footage. But when he asked me, you know, he made me come up, you know, and I said, he said, so what was it like when the creature came attacked Menemsha? And I said, I said something like, I never saw a creature, or I just denied. And afterwards, he took me aside and said, don't ever do that again. Yeah. He said, because if I say something happened, you go with it. Don't you ever deny it. Leave me staying there, because you got the laugh, but at my expense. I said, I'm a rock writer. I'm never going to do this again. I didn't do it the first time. But it stayed in my head that is how it works.
Well, we were when we were texting last night, I said too that I love him in the movie 1941 because it shows such promise, and that's sort of the tragedy of you go from Animal House to, you know, him going into that other movie he did, Old Boyfriends. Remember that with Talia Shire and
Continental Divide.
Continental Divide.
Where he played Mike Royko, and
so you don't get to see.
Oh, he would have done. You know, I mean, Bernie Brillstein used to say, you know, Spencer Tracy. He's Spencer Tracy. I mean, I don't know if that was it, but it would have been a great ride. You know, if he'd, you know, gotten a scare and stayed with us, because the talent was insane.
You also told me another interesting story about the moment where he saw his life changing, which I think I've seen that too with people, that realization that he's going to be. It was
incredible.
Famous.
I mean, it was incredible in that it's happening in real time. So John and his wife Judy invited me and a date to the four of us to go to the Animal House premiere at the Ziegfeld. And this is the premiere. I mean, you know, it hadn't been played anywhere else, and it was a packed house. And you remember the Ziegfeld was enormous. It was a huge theater. And I'm sitting, Judy, John's wife, is sitting between me and John, and my date's on the other side. And I remember looking over, because the laughter was crazy. I mean, and him, when he showed up on screen, it was as if they'd seen it. You know, like when a rock act plays hit songs that no one's heard, but they cheer. It's like as if they knew.
Yes.
And so I literally leaned across Judy just to see, you know, what it was doing to him. And it, you know, he was smiling and all that, but I could, you know, knowing him a bit, I could just see that it was a moment. And then after that, after that, there was an after party, obviously, you know, and we're all sitting the four of us are sitting at a table, and obviously just the world is on him, and he says, you know, entertain the girls. I'm going to go use the John. And like 20, 30 minutes go by, and Judy says, would you go in there and see, you know, get him out? So I go, you know, God knows what. So I walk into the bathroom, and the windows open a crack, and he's gone.
Wow.
I mean, it was just too much. I mean, it was just, he needed, I assume.
Yeah.
But yeah, to see that movie landing squarely on him, because he could, you know, he was a smart man. He knew his life had changed that moment. You know?
One raised eyebrow.
Amazing. The best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just connected with the audience. And so then how did that, you knew him before you knew Bill.
Yes.
And were you writing on the show too?
No.
Or you just were around?
No, and I was still a magazine writer, and the way he introduced me to Bill, you know, I was up at 8H or whatever with John, and he looked past me over my shoulder, so I had to turn around and wave somebody over, and he waved Bill over, and John said, Mitch, this is the new kid, Bill. And I'll never forget, because both of us are now not kids, but I mean, John's was so protective, and you know, because he was a Chicago guy, and John was tight with Brian Dolmer, his older brother, and it was like, you know, Billy was the new kid, and it was, you know, it was a few years after that Bill and I, when we did Scrooged, was like 8 years later or some 7 years later, but yeah, so I was doing magazine writing, and then at one point I was up at SNL as a writer for a minute, because John literally insisted on it. He said, you know, this is a rite of passage, you have to do this, and I was like, okay, and they hired me and Michael to be writers on the show, O'Donoghue, but it was during that bridge moment, so it was like the Piscopo, Eddie Murphy, you know, Lauren had left, and it was Gene Domanian and I forget, or somebody else, and so I lasted until the writer's strike, and writing in a you know, like a Dick Van Dyke table situation, writing jokes, you know, wasn't for me. I just couldn't do it, or didn't like it.
And I wanted you to talk a little bit about Michael O'Donoghue, which again, it's so sad. Like, I don't think, again, people really even remember. I mean, when I was a kid and watching the show, and he was even, the writers were sort of featured.
Yeah.
Part of the show. The writers
Chevy was a
became
writer.
stars.
Exactly.
And his impact. He was like the dark one.
He
the dark guy.
He was. But, you know, as most of those people are, I find, sweetest underneath it. I mean, the most thoughtful, loyal, great friend. I mean, I was best man at his wedding, and he was at mine, and you know, he was one of three guys in my life that I loved. He was like family, and completely dark and insane. I mean, I sometimes try to figure out how he would function, how he would not get killed in today's world, literally, because he's so crazy. I mean, when I first met him, I was doing the piece on Belushi, and I said to John, who should I talk to? You know, who else? And he said, Michael. You know, and so I go down the hall at SNL, and it's middle of the day, but all the blinds are drawn like Godfather coming through the slats and all that, and he's sitting behind his desk with these round mirrored shades he wore, and the entire wall is covered with nude amputees, naked amputated women.
Oh my God!
And it was like, you know, whatever. But you know, and to him, to me, it was like he kept talking to me. I was going, wow. I mean, where do you even find them all? But he had, and so he was the Prince of Darkness, and his stuff on SNL was, I mean, he kept it in that really revolutionary kind of insane, you know, road. And if a sketch happened once or twice, over 2 times, Michael, you know, felt that it was just the greatest, like a band just playing their hits, and we got to keep moving. And he was, but we started working together because
how did you become partners?
I'd interviewed him for this article and started the Crawdaddy cover. I described him. I said, Michael O'Donoghue is like a chemist in a Marseille heroin lab who sells children on the side. And that was the first line, and it was like, you know, we have to work together, and clearly. But so we did. At one point, Lauren wanted to do the 4th. They had 3 Saturdays a month. Saturday Night Live was on 3 times a month. The 4th was dark. NBC gave him the month at that time slot, and so he wanted to do a show. So he asked Michael to do this thing that Michael came up with called Mr. Mike's Mondo Video, And so Michael put together a team of myself, Emily Prager, Dirk Wittenborn, and Michael, the four of us, to do this kind of super dark, perverse, black comic thing, a parody of Mondo Cane, where they would travel the world looking for the odd, the outre, and all that. And we did one, and the censors came up. I'll never forget it. And when they walked out, they turned to Michael and went, "This will never get on the air, ever. So figure something else out, because there's no trim. This is insane. We can't let this exist." And so he went to bed for like a while, Michael, under the covers, and used to sleep like this. But ended up coming out, and there was a place, there was actually news articles about it, because it was in Baltimore, because the headline said we got Billy and Carrie Fisher and Gilda and all these, all the SNL people to be in it, but in it in a sense of like little moments in it, but the marquee would have their names, so people would go assuming it was going to be one of those movies. And then when it wasn't, I mean, in Baltimore they literally pulled a ticket taker who refused to give refunds out of his booth and beat him up. Like the crowd was so yeah, that's how we met Michael. And then we wrote a script together, Michael and I did, called Arrive Alive, and that was shut down in Miami. A whole other story, but Art Linson wrote about it in his book, and it was a major motion picture, and then so we wrote that, and then Scrooge came out of that. So Michael and I had written together for a while, and we'd written a script in between and stuff, and truthfully with Scrooge, even when we wrote it, because it was at the time pretty dark for a Christmas movie, pre Bad Santa. It was
pre-bad. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. It was 1988. When we first turned the draft in, Paramount was not thrilled with us or with the script, or it was only because Billy read it. And
did you know that he was going to be the star, or you just wrote the script first?
We wrote the script, but we wrote for his voice, because first of all, it's a voice that comes really easily.
And what would you call his voice? I just want to hear your
how would I
deadpan, sardonic?
Well, yeah, and also just the rhythm of it. I mean, like writing a line like, "Have you tried Staples?" I mean, it's him. So it's I mean, we heard him, and whether he was going to do it or not, and also it was after Ghostbusters, and he was in a walk the biggest movie star around, and comedy. It was his world, but he'd taken 5 years off, and going to Paris and had another child, and we never thought we'd really get him, but he read the script, and from Friday to Monday, it was like all of a sudden Paramount's, "Come on back, boys. Welcome.
We love it.
We love it." And,
do you feel like the studio was hesitant because it's such a satire of Hollywood specifically? Like, it's a takedown of studios, and you're pitching it to a studio.
Well, I mean, it was a TV centric world that we were having. I mean, it's splitting hairs, but I think that's something that maybe helped. And it wasn't like a Hollywood studio. It was NBC or a version of that. But it was really all about Bill. Yeah. I mean, I think the script was, it was really strong, and people were responding to it beautifully. But we didn't back down very much, and so, it took the muscle of the biggest movie star of the day to. It sounds crazy now, but it wasn't It's a Wonderful Life. It was darker and stranger, and I mean, I remember, the mouse coming out of John Forsythe's the back of his head. Not my idea. That was pure O'Donoghue. I went, I think kids are going to have a problem with that. That could be a PG-13 moment. And but yeah, so Bill never blinked, and I mean, there were some funny moments in the run up to the movie actually getting made. We. Michael and I were in New York, and they fly us out, put us up in a hotel, and obviously, and to have these notes meetings with Sidney Pollack and Bill and studio executives and all that stuff, and we were nervous. I mean, because it's our first, we're getting close to getting a movie made, but Michael said, "You have to be bold. We have to sail into this." So we got matching Corvettes that neither of us could drive. It was like completely embarrassing. Like two red and a black Corvette, I think. We couldn't get out of the parking lot. It was like, but because we were trying to, be dynamic, and but yeah, we had a at one point Bill was really, it was after Tootsie, Billy really wanted Sidney to direct it, Paula.
Yeah.
And so we had a meeting at Sidney's house, a week, I believe, to go through the script and you know, as we were saying, nobody better, and he was.
Yeah,
this is right
great.
after Out of Africa, and you know, he was.
He's so direct.
And he's a mensch.
He just knows problems and.
Exactly so. And as I said, I do remember, like, on Thursday, we'd been through several days, and we'd just, like, crawl back to the hotel because it was so nervous-making, and, you know, we were trying to keep this thing, you know, we just saw how great it could be. And I remember, like, it was around Thursday, Sidney said at one point, well, I just don't think the ghost would say that. And O'Donoghue went, it's a fucking ghost. How do you know what the ghost would say, Sidney? I say the ghost would say that. And I remember going, oh, this is not going well. You know, we were at the table. And then literally the next thing Michael says is, and Sidney with a Y, what are you, a Vegas stripper? What is that? Sidney is S-I, you know. So we'd hit the wall. But fortunately, Sidney laughed and we moved on. We kept, you know.
Well, so another highlight of the film is the crazy cast.
Insane.
It is so. I think that when we look back, I mean, one of the joys I always have late night television, you're watching movies from the 80s and 90s, you're like, everybody's in this movie. Now it seems like there's only 2 people in the movie, and you don't get to enjoy, you know, the great supporting cast of players.
Well, I could be wrong, but I think it's the first movie Buddy Hackett and John Houseman were in together. I mean, you'd have to check IMDb, but I think they, you know, it's the first time anyone's ever put them together. But because you had the TV show within the movie, it had to be the biggest, sleaziest, weirdest Irwin Allen of comedy cast ever.
Right.
And it was. I mean, there were moments where people would be walking past each other. I just go, okay, you know, when you have Robert Mitchum, who you work with as well, Robert Mitchum and Jamie Farr sitting next to each other.
Yeah.
It was worlds colliding. I mean, and Mary Lou Retton practicing her thing. And, you know, I had to walk off set sometimes. It was crazy.
Now, a couple stories. Now, I know you have a story about, because I've heard it from Mr. Murray himself, about Buddy Hackett on unrestrained profanity. I worked with him.
Amazing.
Yeah.
In fact,
in a kid's family
inventive. Movie. Yeah. It was so demented. We were doing a scene where, and Billy loves telling this story because it was insane, where he's trapped at the top, and if you know the movie, he's going to flick the coin down to the little kid, and so there are all these street urchins or whatever, but little child actors and their mothers and guardians and stuff around, and he's up there, Buddy's up there 3 stories high, and they leave him up there. Everybody goes on break or something, and because he's all in makeup and he's kind of been framed and everything, he's up there. And he went completely crazy and started screaming a level of profanity that you know, it was so specific and horrible.
Yeah.
That people were really rushing kids off the set. They were carrying children, hands on things, and he was like, "What are you thinking?" And he'd be like, you know, and Billy was on the set going, "Buddy," you know, just looking up at him, but he was uncontrollable.
Oh my goodness! And also Robert Mitchum. Any Robert Mitchum stories?
We just, you know, truthfully, we were such, you know, fans and in awe that we just kind of buzzed around, and Michael and I trying to service whatever. You know.
I do love the little thing where you said, I need some business.
Yeah. So he's sitting there. He's about to do the scene where he's sitting with Bill at the lunch table, and it's Bill and the other guy and Mitchum, and he says to me and Michael, "You boys have any business for me here? You got any business?" And I remember looking at Michael going, "What's he talking about? Like business?" I mean, he said, "You know, any business?" And I said, "I don't have any business for you." And Michael said, "I had a boss who used to clean his silverware before he ate." And Mitchum's like, his eyes lit up, and he went, "Yes. That's it. Get me a napkin," or whatever. And if you watch it, he is doing that. He's actually, and it, you know, it pulled focus from everybody. And when you watch the scene, for me now, it's only about the silverware cleaning.
Can't wait. I can't wait to see it tonight. I'm gonna laugh. And the other story you told me is how you guys had to rework the ending of the film.
Yeah.
Because you said you ran into problems. You needed an ending, and then you guys went back to the apartment and.
No, well, no, it's funny. It's just something that happened to me on The Recruit, but we did work on on the ending of Scrooged.
There was like an epiphany. You said that that's the one day in New York that everybody is.
Well, yeah, that was happening while we were writing. That was before shooting. We got to, chronologically move through the script. We started in winter in New York, and then it was July because it was just taking forever. And Michael and I just wanted to kill each other, and it was hot, and we're in his apartment, and we're at that moment where Ebenezer Scrooge comes back from the dead, and we looked at each other and said, okay, what can we say that isn't complete bullshit? What can we say that, it's just a beautiful time of year. Everything we said was so inauthentic, and wrong. And we finally hit on that thing, which is Christmas Eve in New York, people are nicer to each other. And I looked at Michael and I said, well, that's a miracle. I mean, which it is. And literally, as you're walking down the streets, people are, hey, how are you? All of a sudden, becomes like a little village. And and so we wrote for one night, and we were the people we always hoped we would be. And then looked at each other and went, well, that's kind of Capra-esque. I mean, it really felt like something we could stand behind, even though we distilled it down to one night. But so I was always really proud of, the great thing about having Dickens, the master, plot man ever, is that we had the structure and we knew where it was going to go. I mean, you're going to get to that moment of redemption, and so it was the gift of that. But for us, getting to that place and then having Frank Cross, Bill's character, say something real, took us a while, and we never changed. Once we wrote that thing, we never tweaked it, or that was exactly how it was the day we wrote it.
I can't wait to see it tonight. Or do you have a favorite scene for yourself?
The only scenes that completely destroy me, that I'm horrified by, are the ones I'm in, because Donner insisted in some perverse, the boys. I still don't think he knows my name, but it's just, me and Michael were the boys. We had to be in the movie. And so Michael has a scene as a priest, and his is kind of dignified, and he's reading, whatever from the Bible. Yeah. It was supposed to be like a Hitchcock kind of walk through a party scene. And then by the time we shot it, there were 4 people on a couch, and I was one of them. So there's nowhere to hide. I'm just like, completely terrified and awful. And so tonight, I mean, there was a flop sweat dread that hits me because they were screaming at me, from behind the camera. Donner's, lighten up, have fun. I'm going, I'm in hell.
I can't wait.
Yeah, it'll amuse you.
I think I predict some applause. So
I thought you were going to say work from that. But no.
Well, no, after that, I mean, everything was set. Now, what's really surprised me is that you would also do the script for Great Expectations.
Poor Dickens. I mean,
well, how did that come about with Art Linson?
Yeah, same producer, and I think
get the Dickens guy.
I don't want to minimize, the genius behind it, but I think some of it had to do with it was free and public domain. I'm not exactly sure.
I see.
And it might not be now, but at the time, you didn't have to pay the Dickens. It was like just existed like Don Quixote or something, and as a classic. But and I took it, and again. You have a surplus of plots because Dickens is the master, and so I went through the original text a million times, and to me the heart of it was the love story, and so that's what I focused on, and I'm really proud of it. It has a magic to it that Alfonso Cuarón obviously brought to it. It was his second movie. He wasn't. He spoke English well and all that, but I write in such a kind of the moment then, anyhow, idiomatic way. That it wasn't like a natural fit, but visually, I mean, you look at Roma as well. I mean, he's operating at another level, and Chivo shot it, and so and the cast was amazing, and there were moments of that I really remember, and I was proud of it. I love doing it, and it's amazing because there's a certain generation of usually a woman actually, but who that was their love story. That was their coming over, and I can tell when they hear it, that they're in their late 30s or early 40s, and it's just they get all because it was so romantic in its way, and And I set it where I grew up. I mean, I said it originally, it was Miami, but it became Sarasota, Florida, and
Right.
and then in New York, Soho art world that I knew, and yeah, but and it's interesting because in this country, in England, where you think they'd be so protective of Dickens, they were really loving it, and the reviews were wonderful, you know, across the board. Here, they were all, the critics were more how dare he kind of thing, you know, updated, or and there was a moment where I wanted to call it something else just to avoid all of that, you know, but you know, 20th wouldn't, they liked Great Expectations, and but it's about, I think it's like 22 years old now, and it holds up.
So, and then another of your films, The Recruit, is starring Al Pacino and directed by Roger Donaldson. So you, after Michael passed away, then you became like a solo writer.
Yeah, actually, Great Expectations I was already thinking of for myself, you know, but I wanted to work with Michael again, obviously, as well. And but yeah, Michael passed away in '92, and it was good because, not that he passed away, but it was good that I'd already started thinking about writing alone. And when we wrote together, it was excruciatingly slow.
Right.
I mean, you know, there were moments I just went, wow. And we, you know, it just took a long time. The results were always great or interesting, but I wrote faster, and yeah, Great Expectations felt like something I wanted to do alone anyhow. But then yeah, afterwards I started, you know, those scripts after that were just me. Yeah, and yeah, The Recruit was really cool because Colin Farrell was a kid. He was 25, a madman in those days, and just the most charismatic, charming. It was like, I always wanted to know what it'd be like to work with, you know, that generation of Albert Finney, you know, Oliver Reed, kind of wild Brit guy, Irish Brit. He'd kill me for saying Brit, but you know, from the Isles.
Yes.
And I got my taste of it because he was, you know, he was all of that and more, and you know, just still a friend. I love his work, his recent stuff. And I got to meet and write for and work with Pacino, which was silly. And you know, we had a table read, you know, the actual whether this movie is going to go forward, because I've been rewriting the script. I came onto it, and Al was going to come and do this table read, and his reaction to it would either make the movie or not, you know, how he liked it. So the entire, everybody, you know, all the department heads are at this long table in Toronto, and Al walks in all in black with a long black overcoat, and I mean, basically we're just shitting. It's like, you know, wow. And he comes in, and he and Colin sit at the head of the table, and we start the read through, and I'm, you know, it was heavy pressure, and we start the read through, and about 3 pages in, Colin looks at Al and goes, "Isn't he fucking gorgeous? Don't you? I just want to throw my leg over and hump him." You know, and we're at the end of the table, and I went again, "Oh Lord!" And Al completely loved it, loved him, because it was just, you know, Al had done something great in the read through, and Colin couldn't control himself. So then we ended up making the movie, thank God, and they were great together, and Al and I had that week I wrote you about last night. Where
Rewriting with Al
the ending.
Pacino.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, you know.
It was crazy. And it was crazy because, you know, every night we'd do this work in his office on, you know, in Uptown, and I'd go home to the hotel and write it up, and, you know, it was a collaboration in a great way. And then he would do it the next day, and every single version was amazing. You know, so at one point he'd say to me, you know, "What do you think? Is this working?" I went, "You're Al Pacino. It's incredible." Yeah, it's all working. You know, I was settled on Monday. We went through to Friday, and yeah, it was a dream. It was great working, you know, with him, for him.
And then you also directed Passion Play.
Yes.
Then was this your only time directing?
Yes, it is.
And how did you feel about the transition to directing?
You know, the script was really beautiful, humbly, and it was based on falling in love with Kelly, but it was magical realism, I guess, you know, searching for the most pretentious way to describe it. But it was about a carnival girl with wings, and it was just too ambitious. I mean, in other words, I'm still proud of it, and I'm proud of the attempt of it, and the cast. You know, everybody read the script and bought into. It was an amazing cast. You know, Billy and Mickey Rourke and Megan Fox was wonderful in it, and Risa Fons and Kelly, and deep into the cast. It was beautiful, and I had, Chris Doyle, the great Chris Doyle, who'd done Wong Kar-wai movies, shooting it, and so it was a beautiful mounted thing. We didn't have the money we needed, and really, at the end of the day, it's one of those things where you go to special effects people or whatever and say, I need wings, but I need them to be dirty and not angelic. They have to look like a bird, like she's a freak, and they go, wings are so easy, it's a joke. And then as soon as we started to like shoot, and everything they sent me was so terrible, I went, oh God, this is going to be. And so we had like 215 effects shots in a $14 million movie, and me as a first-time director, but there are things about it. I love it. I love it as a child. I love it all the way through, and I would do it again. And in fact, when I was doing Magic City, the TV series, as showrunner, not to diminish the directing, because obviously they're directing, but it's the Uber director in a sense, where you're on set, you set the tone and all that. So I didn't direct any episodes, but I felt like I had, in a way.
I think the writer's directing television. I think TV's different than film. The showrunner is the director of a TV show.
It really, in essence, and not to marginalize or diminish and I had great directors, all these Game of Thrones guys and beautiful work, but yeah, it's much more collaborative and much more writer driven, obviously. And in my case, I was on set always. I mean, I just was. So so maybe someday, it'd be cool to do again, and I just wouldn't be. And it was so great because we were at the Toronto Film Festival. The movie got into the Toronto Film Festival, and Bill and my friend Graydon Carter and people came. The cast obviously was there, and Billy hugged me afterwards. He's sitting behind me with his son. And he said, "That's beautiful. I'm so glad I did it." And to tell you how stand up he is. I had an actor fall out of the third lead in that movie over Christmas, and the producers went nuts. It was like, it wasn't a casual part; it was the villain, the heavy. And Bill called. It was like 2 days before, like now. It was right before Christmas. What's going on? I said, well, do you like directing? I said, yeah, I love it. He said, but I lost this actor. And he said, well, what's the part? I said, well, it's this guy, and he's a gangster. And can I read it? I went, yeah, sure. And I sent him, because as you know, you never know where it's going in the void, but he knew that there was a time right after the holidays where we were going to start shooting again. And like 6-7 hours later, he called, and after he got it, it was the next day, it was football Sunday. I was amazed he called, and he said, okay, I'll be there. When do you need me? And I said, I think January 3rd. He said, okay, I'll be there. And he was. And no deal, it was astounding, really, because I was truly screwed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you guys have such a touching relationship, and the behind the scenes too. You've been super helpful to me. Always, you're so grounded to me. Like you seem, to me, who's had such an amazing career, and yet you stay humble and grounded. I'm enthusiastic, and I really admire.
Well, I love it. I love doing it, and also when you're working with, as you know, when you're working with people who at that level, it's an education, and inspiring, but you'd have to be insane to be not humble.
Well, no, but when you're starting out, I think that the big thing for people is, sometimes you talk to veterans and they're like, get out of the business, and it's really not
Save
what
yourself.
you not really want to hear. So when you hear about other struggles or stories or the things that cheer you up, it's the same enthusiasm.
Well, it's it sounds like my first time in the big city, but I mean that day, Michael and I both, and we were pretty cynical, or whatever, New York writers. The day we saw all those trucks and the production that Scrooged was taking over New York City, and it was blocks of stuff, we were like giddy. I mean, really, there was nothing cool about us. We were going, oh my God, and Michael kept calling it the big train. Glazer, the big train's rolling. And but so yeah, it was hard to get jaded, and I still love it. I mean, and that, which is a joy. And I live with an actor, and so.
Wonderful Kelly Lynch.
The magical Kelly Lynch.
Now, is it true you secretly rewrite her dialogue for movies? I wish would you do that for me too?
Totally. Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm gonna call you upset.
Yeah.
On the show that I can't say that I'm on yet.
That's crazy.
I can't say.
Okay, well, it's exciting.
At least I'm working.
Yeah, and working at a beautiful show. But yeah, so I still love it, and you know, our daughter is you know, the smart one. She's in animation, and Shane and is a writer in the She-Ra, which is a reboot of that you know, 85 show that's caught fire, and she's in the writer's room, and poor thing, and you know, I thought hearing me, you know, whine and thrash in the office would have just cured her of that, but she was apparently still, you know, impressed, and so she does it too.
Well, my dear Mitch Glazer, thank you so much for being here. Tonight you're going to be at the New Beverly.
God, it sounds like a Vegas act, but yeah, I mean, you know, they're showing it in 35. In 35, they got a print from Paramount, and Quentin Tarantino asked if I would do a Q&A, which is, and for me, it's like this. It's a joy to do, and also to celebrate Michael. You know, as you say, people should know how amazing he was and his work is. And can I tell one Quentin Tarantino story?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, so this is before I met him, and I don't know Quentin well, but and I have to really think about his name, because my friend Jerry Harrington, the late Jerry Harrington, who was amazing, was a manager, and he was Nick Cage's manager, and he told me the story that he was in Ed LaMotta's office, I guess at William Morris or wherever it was at the time, the legendary, actor's agent, and he was with Nick, and Ed LaMotta was trying to show apparently how connected he was to like the new breed directors, and this is years ago, and at one point he turns in and he says to his assistant, "David, get me Trenton Quarantino on the phone." And literally now I have to stop before I say his name, because Trenton Quarantino is exactly what's in my head. So yeah, Trenton. I don't think he'll be there tonight, but
it kind of sounds right though.
Doesn't
like
it?
It's just close enough that I
Quarantino.
don't know if even he would notice. You know,
Trenton. Fantastic. But yeah, so tonight we'll see.
Oh, it's going to be amazing. Mitch, thank you so much. Please come back anytime.
For sure. It was great. Thank you, Lou.
Anytime.
Well, you guys can look out for, of course, Mitch's holiday classic, Scrooged.
Yes.
I have to recommend A Very Merry Christmas, because I love that.
Bless you.
Yeah.
We didn't even get to it.
I know. You have to come back.
And it's on
because
now.
I was going to say, all of you have Netflix, I know it, so you have to go watch that. It's wonderful.
Yes.
And, of course, you can buy Illeana's book, I Blame Dennis Hopper.
That's right.
Mitch, I know you have some things in development that you can't really talk about, as do you. That's kind of the thesis statement of our podcast, I think, is you can't talk about it, but it's good stuff. So
It'll be wonderful, yeah.
good,
It'll all be
excellent.
wonderful.
Well, you guys can buy
Connecting on
Illeana's book, I Blame Dennis Hopper, now in paperback and bookstores and Amazon. It's a great read, and you should definitely buy it. Also, you can like our Facebook page and check out our website, Illeana'sPodcast.com.
This is our last show of the season.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Goodbye, everyone. Have a great day. Bye.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network. The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Popcorn Talk Network or its owners or principals.